I can still hear it, that sound. The echo of thousands of voices chanting my name. The vibration of the drums beneath my hands. The light that used to blind me every night. Sometimes, even now when the world is quiet, I can feel that rhythm pulsing somewhere deep inside me. It's not loud anymore. It's more like a heartbeat. Soft, distant, fading. For years, people have asked me, "Phil, why did you stop singing?" And for a long time, I avoided the answer. I'd smile, give a polite explanation. Health reasons. Time to rest. I've done enough. But the truth, the real truth, is more complicated than that. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to stop doing the one thing that gave your life meaning. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, like a light dimming 1 degree at a time, until you realize you're standing in the dark. I was born in London, January 1951. Music wasn't just something I loved, it was something I was. Even before I could speak properly, I was tapping on everything I could find. My mother used to say I didn't walk, I marched. Spoons, pots, tables, and they were my first drum kit. I didn't dream of fame. I dreamed of rhythm, that heartbeat between silence and sound. That's what fascinated me. By the time I was 12, I already had my first drum set. I'd spend hours locked in my room, playing along to the Beatles, the Shadows, the Who, losing track of time completely. It wasn't discipline, it was obsession. I didn't want to be good, I needed to be. When I joined Genesis, I was just a kid with wild hair and restless hands. A drummer, a background guy. I didn't have the look of a rock star or the voice of a frontman. I was the quiet one, the one who found comfort behind the kit, not in front of the mic. Back then, Genesis was Peter Gabriel's band. He was the voice, the soul, the face everyone looked at. And I was fine with that. I was happy to play, to stay in the shadows, to be the heartbeat behind someone else's story. But life has a strange way of changing the script when you least expect it. When Peter left in 1975, we were lost. Our voice was gone. We auditioned singers, one after another, some good, some terrible, but none that felt right. One day, after yet another failed audition, someone joked, "Why don't you try it, Phil?" I laughed. I wasn't that guy. I was the drummer, the safe one. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the mic, and I sang, and in that moment, something shifted. The band looked at me differently. It wasn't a perfect performance, but it was real. Raw, emotional, honest. I didn't realize it then, but that small moment, that simple what if, would change the rest of my life. Suddenly, I wasn't just the drummer anymore. I was the voice. And with that came a weight I never asked for. The late 70s and 80s were a blur. Albums, tours, interviews, flights, lights. A constant cycle that felt like living inside a dream you couldn't wake up from. People think fame gives you everything. But fame doesn't give, it takes. It takes your privacy, your peace, your sense of who you really are. I remember the first time I heard In the Air Tonight on the radio. It was surreal, hearing my pain turned into sound. That song wasn't about fame or success. It was about heartbreak, about losing love and trying to survive the echo of it. When people talk about that drum break, that iconic, thunderous crash, they don't realize it came from rage, from loss, from a man drowning in silence and trying to breathe again. Every concert after that was electric. Tens of thousands of people singing those words back to me. My pain, my story, reflected in their voices. It's beautiful and terrifying, because after a while, you start to live for it. You start to believe that the stage is who you are, and the applause, it becomes your oxygen. The more successful I became, the more disconnected I felt from myself. Every night was another version of the same dream. Bright lights, perfect songs, and a little voice in the back of my head whispering, "You can't keep this up forever." But I ignored it. I drowned it in music, in tours, in work. When you're loved by millions, it's easy to forget how to love yourself. I told myself I was fine, that this was what I'd always wanted, that I was living the dream, but deep down, I knew something was breaking. There were nights when I'd come off stage, sweat pouring down my face, and I'd just sit there in the dressing room, alone. Not because I didn't have people around me, but because no one really saw me. They saw Phil Collins, the legend, not the man underneath. It's a strange feeling, to be adored by the world and still feel invisible. I remember one night after a show in New York. The crowd was massive, the energy insane. People were crying, laughing, singing their hearts out. It should have been perfect. But I walked off stage, closed the dressing room door, and just sat there, staring at my hands. My fingers were trembling. I could still feel the vibration of the drums in my bones, but something inside me had gone quiet. That was the first time I felt fear, not stage fright. I'd dealt with that long ago. No, this was different. It was the fear that maybe, just maybe, the fire was fading. As the years passed, the world around me kept getting louder, and my body, slower. The music industry evolved, the trends shifted, and suddenly, I wasn't the young man breaking new ground anymore. I was the veteran, the survivor of a golden era. I should have felt proud. But instead I felt tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. My back started hurting constantly. Then my hands. At first I blamed it on age. Getting old, I'd joke. But deep down I knew. Decades of drumming had taken their toll. I'd given everything, my voice, my energy, my body, to the music. And now it was starting to ask for something back. That's when the real struggle began. Not on the stage, but inside me. I wasn't ready to admit that my body couldn't keep up anymore. I told myself I could push through, that the pain was just temporary. But pain has a way of reminding you that you're human. No matter how much fame or legacy you build, your body always tells the truth. There were nights when I'd finish a concert and my hands would go numb. I'd have to tape the sticks to my fingers just to keep playing. People thought it was dedication, and maybe it was, but it was also denial. I was fighting against time itself. I didn't want to let go. Not of the music, not of the stage, not of the man I was when the lights came on. Because when the lights go out, you start to wonder who's left standing in the dark. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. I was still pretending everything was fine, still telling myself I could handle it. But deep inside, a small voice kept whispering, "Phil, it's time," and I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. Not while the music was still playing. I remember the exact moment my body told me the truth. It wasn't on stage. It wasn't during a rehearsal or a tour. It was a simple morning. Gray skies, cold London rain, and me, sitting at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea. I tried to lift it, and my hand shook. It was such a small thing, but in that tremble I saw everything. The years, the exhaustion, the cost, and for the first time, I felt fear, not of failure, but of finality. You never think about your body betraying you when you're young. You believe you'll always have control. But the truth is, time always wins. Doctors told me it was nerve damage, spinal problems from decades of drumming. I'd pushed myself past every limit, and now my body was collecting the debt. They told me I should stop. Rest. Heal. But how do you rest from something that is your identity? I didn't know who I was without the music, so I did what I always did. I kept going, even when my fingers went numb. Even when the pain shot down my arms. Even when I had to tape the drumsticks to my hands just to finish a show. I remember looking down one night during a concert, the tape cutting into my skin, blood mixing with sweat, and thinking, how much longer can I do this? But the crowd was cheering. The lights were on, and the music was louder than the pain, for a while. That was enough. The audience never knew. They saw energy, passion, power, but behind the curtain I was collapsing. After every show, I'd sit in the dressing room, hands numb, legs shaking, back screaming, and tell myself, just one more tour. That one more tour lasted years. People would say, "Phil, you've already done everything. Why push yourself?" But they didn't understand. The stage wasn't just my job, it was my heartbeat. Without it, I didn't know how to live. You see, when you've spent your entire life being someone to the world, you forget how to just be someone to yourself. The hardest part wasn't the pain. It was the realization that I couldn't give people the same Phil Collins anymore. That scared me more than anything, because I didn't want their last memory of me to be a broken man struggling to reach a note. There was one concert. I'll never forget it. I was sitting on stage because I could no longer stand for long periods. Halfway through, against all odds, I felt my voice start to shake. It wasn't just my throat, it was my entire body. Every nerve, every muscle, screaming at me to stop. I looked out into the crowd. Thousands of faces, smiling, singing along. And for a brief moment, I wanted to disappear, because I knew I couldn't give them what they deserved. That was the night I knew. Not officially, not publicly. But in my heart, I knew. The end had already begun. After the tour, I went home. No lights, no cameras, no noise, just me and the silence. It's funny how loud silence can be. When you've lived surrounded by music for so long, the quiet becomes unbearable. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd wake up in the morning expecting to hear sound checks or phone calls, or someone knocking on the hotel door saying, "Time to go, Phil." But there was no one. Just stillness. Just me and the ticking of a clock that never seemed to stop. I tried to fill the silence with other things. Family, television, even alcohol. But none of it replaced the rush of the stage. The truth is, I wasn't addicted to fame. I was addicted to feeling alive. And now, without the stage, I felt like a ghost of myself. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. Not because I didn't want to, but because I physically couldn't. My back would seize up. My legs would go numb. Some mornings I couldn't even pick up the phone. That's when it hit me. The thing that had once given me life was now taking it away. And still, I didn't hate it. How could I? Music had been my best friend, my lover, my purpose. Even in pain, I couldn't resent it. But I started to ask questions I'd never asked before. Who am I without the applause? Who am I when the microphone is off? Will anyone still care when the music stops? The answers didn't come easily. I tried retirement once before, back in 2011. I said I was done, that I'd had enough. But it didn't stick. The stage called me back. There's a strange pull that performers feel, like gravity from another life. No matter how far you run, you always end up back under the lights. So I came back, against the advice of doctors, against the limits of my body. I thought maybe I could control it this time, do fewer shows, pace myself, stay safe. But music doesn't work like that. Once you step on stage, the energy takes over, and you forget about pain, about time, about everything, until the lights go out again, and reality comes crashing back. By 2019, my body was finished. I was walking with a cane, barely able to hold a drumstick. Even singing had become a fight. There's a video from my last tour. I'm sitting down, barely moving, but smiling through it all. People saw courage. What they didn't see was the heartbreak. Every song I sang felt like saying goodbye to an old friend. Every lyric carried a weight I could barely hold. When I sang "Take a Look at Me Now," I wasn't singing to an audience anymore. I was singing to the man I used to be. Then came the moment of truth. One night, just before walking on stage, I looked in the mirror. My reflection looked back at me. Tired eyes, trembling hands, a man who had spent 50 years giving everything to the world. And I asked myself, is this still love? Or is it survival? It's a difficult thing to admit, that something you've loved all your life has started to hurt you. But I finally realized that the bravest thing I could do was stop, not because I didn't care anymore, but because I cared too much to let it destroy me. That night, I went out, gave it everything I had left, every ounce of energy, every note, every breath. And when the lights went down, I knew. That was it. My last real show. After that, the world felt quieter. Too quiet. I didn't announce anything right away. I needed time to process, to grieve, to understand. Because that's what it was. A kind of grief. You don't just lose a career. You lose a part of yourself. I remember sitting alone one night, listening to old recordings. My younger voice, strong, full, alive. And I thought, that man doesn't exist anymore. But then, another thought followed. and maybe that's okay. I began to see that endings aren't always tragedies. Sometimes they're transitions, the end of one song, the beginning of silence that holds new meaning. I started spending more time with my family. I learned to appreciate mornings again, the kind without sound checks or flights or interviews. The kind where you can just sit by a window, watch the light change, and realize you're still here. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't have to be Phil Collins, the icon. I could just be Phil. The world remembers me for my songs, my voice, my drums, but I hope one day they also remember the man who finally learned how to be quiet. Because silence, after a lifetime of sound, isn't emptiness. It's peace.